That was one of Charles Barkley's favorite songs.
Really?
The Warrior.
Yeah, it's an awesome song.
Wow, thanks. Whoever did that. Okay. Let's go. Man, that is impressive. Okay. All right, this is my other pair of glasses. I don't know if you that were in the first service this morning, my glasses broke. I thought it had a little piece that's down here. No, it actually broke the arm itself. So the pen is still in there, but this is my other pen. If you can look over here on the left, yes, this is indeed a paper clip that is holding these together. This is my backup pair. So I go to Costco and I buy these things you can get like 5 of them at a time, and they're great. And I do that because I know I'm going to lose them. And it doesn't matter how expensive or how inexpensive, I'm going to lose glasses. And this goes all the way back to high school. About 3 pair of Ray-Bans before I finally said, I just need to buy cheap sunglasses. And then I started making good money in college, and I thought, I'm going to buy me some Varnays. For those of you that remember Varnays. And I did that, and I think the first week that I had that, I was in class in college. And left it in the class. And I'm not going 10 minutes, go back to the class, and everybody's like, no, I don't know where those glasses are. A bunch of cheap college students stealing my glasses. On there. Yes, that is my judgmental spirit that comes out. Hey, great chapter this week. And let me just say this on the front end again. This has been a long weekend for me, but a really good weekend. And today's been a long day, but a really good day. And so we had 2 services this morning, which we had some baptisms and Lord's Supper, and preached. And then I went over and did some more baptisms at a person's house. Had a celebration there. After that, went and did a counseling appointment, and then came over here. And I will tell you, it's a long day, but man, it has been a really good, fruitful day. And later on tonight, I'll sit back a little bit more and I'll contemplate. And I promise you, later on tonight, I'll just go, Lord, thank you for just letting me be a part of that with folks. So we all here this morning, did you get to see all of the students, the younger students? I'm talking, there were elementary school age students that were in here that are becoming communing members. And just, man, what a fantastic thing to say. Yeah, the Lord's building his church. I mean, he really is. So it's good to see. So this is chapter 10 in Matthew. Great discussion over here. I took some notes on the discussion because you taught me some things that I thought, oh man, I probably ought to say that on camera. Then I'll look really smart. But you're the ones that made some of these insights. So I'm just going to steal from you on a portion of it. I love the fact that this is, and I mean this is one of my favorite times when I get to come in here, one of my favorite times in the week, because the Tuesday morning group, there's a Sunday morning group as well. Is that right, Dan? Does this? The fact that we are taking the time to study the scriptures like this is just fruitful. It's one of the best things that we can do with our time in church. And to do that in the context where we get to stimulate one another and give some thoughts and insights, and same Holy Spirit that talks to me, talks to you. And so again, hopefully I'll be of some help to you. You've been definitely of help to me. And I love this. So I hope we never stop doing this, ever. For years and years. I'd love to be here 20 years from now and going, hey, look, here's the new study that we're coming out. All right, so Matthew chapter 10, you've been plugging along. Keep in mind, Matthew, this gospel is written, and there's a distinctly Jewish flavor that it is written with. And we'll see that in here in Jesus' instructions a little bit later on. But he starts this chapter out. Keep in mind the chapters are man-made. There's some really bright person decided to give us ways in which we could actually read it a little bit easier, divide it up, study it a little bit better. And then for those of you that do know Greek and can read that, you know how difficult it is actually to read sentences that oftentimes don't even have punctuation. And just a bunch of letters in there. So this is a great service that somebody has done for us. So chapter 10 starts out, and he, that is Jesus, called to him 12 disciples and gave them authority over unclean spirits. So this is a theme that Matthew's going to come back to over and over again, and it is the authority of Jesus. He's going to close the book out by Jesus is going to say, I've got all authority that has been given to me, but Matthew's pointing this out all along. And so now we see the shift, whereas the chapters previous to this are looking at all the things that Jesus himself is doing, and so now he starts to hand some of this ministry off to the disciples. And this is really important. And it's really important because if you remember in the book of Acts, it's in Antioch that's the first time in which Christians are referred to as Christians. And it is actually a term that is used that's a little bit of a, the world would be looking and saying, oh, those are the Christians. They were saying it mocking. They were saying these are little Christs. In the same kind of way that in our day and age, we find people that wear jerseys, whether it be a baseball jersey or a football jersey or a basketball, and you can find 1,000 boys who run around with the number 10 for the favorite player. There are people that are to this day wearing a Chicago Bulls number 23. He's been gone from the game for a long time. I don't even have to tell you what his name is. You know, be a basketball fan to know. In the same kind of way, this is what they were doing. Those are those Christians, those little Christs that are over there. We are to be little Christ, so smaller scale. We can only do in a short term and a smaller scale what Jesus does on the eternal scale in a much grander way. But we're called to do the same things. And so Jesus now is beginning to hand the ministry off to the disciples. You brought it up earlier. Just if you were in that crowd, how would you like to have been one of the disciples? And Jesus says, hey, I just want you to know I'm going to give you authority, and I'm going to give you authority to drive out some demons, to heal people of their diseases like leprosy. Like what you've been watching me do, you're going to be able to do the same thing. I really, really believe this. I'm not just saying this for dramatic effect. I really believe if I would have been in there, I would have spoken up like Peter because I got a mouth and I don't mind opening it and thinking later. I'm in the process. I really would have thought, I think I would have said, Jesus, you may think we could do that, but there's no chance we can do that. And I think Jesus probably would have smiled and said, why don't you just listen? I'm giving you the authority that I have. And I'm telling you, you're going to go do these things. So what we know is that these guys on other occasions had gone out, or so they would go out, and they would do these exact things. And then they would come back, and when they would come back, there would be this debrief from Jesus. Do you remember on one of these occasions when she says, hey, don't be so jacked up over the fact that you can do this, this, and this. Be more excited that your name is written in the Lamb's Book of Life. It's good to do all these pretty wow things. It's a really good thing. But what we ought to take great solace in is the fact that God, for some strange reason, has decided to rest his love upon us, not because of something we would do or not because of something we had not done. He did it just because he wanted to lavish his love, his grace, his mercy upon us. And so Jesus tells them, enjoy it, minister. The ministry I'm giving to you so that we can multiply this thing all over the earth, but just be glad that you're children. In that list, I did write that down. I think Dan said it earlier. I don't know that list was looking at the differences so much as I was noticing what was the same. And according to my list, and just because I wrote it down this way doesn't make it true, but I think this is the case. There are 3 people on this list who have the same spot, no matter who the author is. Whether that's Matthew, Mark, or Luke in the Gospel of Luke or in the book of Acts. So Simon Peter is listed first, Philip is listed as 5th, and Judas Iscariot is listed last. So what should we take from that? That Peter is the most important, that Philip is 5th most important, and Judas is no. I just thought it was interesting. And probably they were using some sort of a list there. Or it could have been that they had just gotten used to just rattling this off, and people just started with Peter, James, and John. Because they were the ones that, according to the Scripture, seemed to be the closest friends of Jesus. of these 12. So what do I think the accounts for the differences? I don't think it's necessarily anything important, but I'm open to being proven wrong if the differences are if there's some significant reason for the differences. Now, question number 5. I starred this one. And it says, the question in there, how should we follow the same model today in praying for laborers as well as answering the call to go? Just a few weeks ago, the guys that I meet with on Wednesday nights, we were walking through the Gospel of Mark, actually, at this time. This is a book they wanted to go through, and I said, great. And so we're walking through it, and we got to a section that is similar to this right here, and we're talking about praying for laborers, praying for people to go out into the kingdom. And it was one of the guys that said, I don't think I realized until now that this could be one of the ways in which we will pray, and while we're praying, we will simultaneously be the answer to our own prayer. That as we are praying for God to send forth laborers, we are actually saying, and yes, Lord, send me. That it's almost this way. Think of it like this. God, would you send some others so that we could go and enter into the harvest field? And we can just sow seed. Can we just go and share the good news as often as we can with those that we have some type of a relationship with? I am never against sharing the gospel with someone that you don't know at all. We should always be prepared to give an answer for the reason for our hope. I'm not at all afraid to share my faith on an airplane or on a golf course or et cetera. That's just not normative for me. I think what's far more normal is when I begin to develop a relationship with someone, be it one of my kids' sports teams, parents there, if I coach a team. As I get to meet people and know them, I just wait for a certain amount of time to go. And then when I think they trust me and I trust them, I just start asking about their spirituality. And I just want to hear how they're doing. And so I have not stopped praying this prayer since the day I got to Wildwood in 2016. And the prayer is, Lord, bring more of them. It's just fun right now. If you were to listen to some of the folks in our church talk about the kinds of conversations, it's just fun. It's just fun to be around. The last 2 weeks, we've got one of our neighbors, a gentleman that he and I both been praying for. And this guy's been fairly hardened. I say it with a smile because he's an endearing soul. He's a wonderful guy, but he's also very harsh. And he is not afraid to speak what he perceives to be the truth. And he's come to church 2 out of the last 3 weeks. It's kind of fun. Great conversations that we've had afterwards. So pray and then realize that we are actually a part of the answer to our prayer. That list, I hope you did that. I hope you made that list of the activities that the disciples are instructed to do on their mission, those 15 verses. They're to go to the lost sheep of Israel. And notice that Jesus even specifically says, hey, don't yet go to the Gentiles. Go first to the lost sheep of Israel. And I had to sit on that one and think about that one for a little bit. And I'm saying, now I wonder why Jesus at this point in the gospel is instructing them to stay here for it. Because it can't be that he doesn't want any folks outside the Jewish faith to come to faith. Can't be that. I think Matthew is showing us, in here, the priority that Jesus is saying, hey, we want to see the lost sheep in Israel. Not Paul in Romans writes, not all of Israel is Israel. And so we want to see the lost sheep in Israel come to faith, and then they will be the catalyst for the world to get this gospel. Peter would head up the church in Jerusalem. Paul would later on head up the church in the Gentile world and go. I also found it interesting when he says that, hey, stay at the house where you are welcomed. Just stay there. And if somebody's going to welcome you, then bring peace to that home. And if they're not going to welcome you, it's okay. Shake the dust off and move on. Notice what Jesus doesn't say to do. Notice he doesn't say, and then after that, go around and badmouth them as much as you possibly can, to try and ruin their reputation. He just says, go. If you're not welcomed, you're not welcomed. It's all right. God is the one who's in charge of moving and stirring their hearts. And if you take a step in and you get a sense that they're stepping back, it's okay. Now, when it's not okay is when we want to take a step in for those that we are closest to. That's when it's emotionally the hardest. And I want to take a step in and say, what do you think about these things spiritually? Tell me about your experiences. And if they just want nothing to do with it, emotionally, that's far more difficult to deal with. Maybe that's a parent. Maybe it's a sibling. Maybe it's a child. Maybe it's a close coworker. Maybe it's a cousin. Maybe it's somebody that you care a great deal about, and if they're not interested, then they're not interested. And so what Jesus is not saying is give up on the relationship. I think what he's saying is it's okay. Don't try to force it. The other one that I really liked, there's when he says, in essence, don't charge for ministry. Don't accept the gold, the silver. I can't remember the way that it was listed in there, but don't charge for ministry. I personally think that this principle continues to remain true for this day. I don't know how it is that I would charge Wildwood for ministry. How do you come up with the pay scale? How in the world, for example, would we come up with a pay scale that says what Caroline Veliber does with our children when they're at the most impressionable moments of their life, we think it's worth this much money? Or student ministries, or how in the world do you put a value on doing ministry, and in particular in this context of bringing the gospel to people who don't yet know the gospel? How do you put a price tag on that? So you don't. You don't charge for it. You offer it freely, and then what you say is, Lord, give me enough. Cause people to come alongside and to say, we want to help support you in this cause. We want to help move you forward. We want to pray for you. We want to give of our time with you. We want to encourage you in the process. But we don't want people to have to charge for the ministry. I will make no comment, and I mean that, I will make no comment at all in any negative light over those who have made a tremendous amount of money within gospel ministry. Books, for example, that have been written, conferences. I will just tell you, again, I mean it in no disrespect, I just struggle with preachers who have a large honorarium that is required to go. I just struggle with it. I was at a conference, this would have been 10-ish years ago because I was still in Atlanta. And again, nobody knows my name. I haven't written a book. But I was the morning session speaker. He was the evening session speaker. And I will tell you, I don't know how much he made. I just know that the people were so grateful to say, hey, David, thanks for just being so willing. Because I was able to make a whole lot less so that he can make a whole lot more to be there. God used it. This guy's an incredibly gifted communicator. It's God's word. It's going forward. I have no negative comment. I just say, can we as a people, can we continue to make a commitment that says, we're not trying to get people in gospel ministry to get wealthy. We're just trying to meet their needs so that they don't have to do something else on the side and just focus in on how do we minister. That makes sense? I think that's the way that we want to go. Question number 7, tucked in the middle of the supernatural works is a call to proclamation. What is it the disciples are called to proclaim? I like this word here a lot. There's a couple of different ways that I think that we get into gospel conversations with people. I think one of them is conversational in nature, meaning I'm asking a question, you're asking a question, I'm sharing my thoughts, you're sharing your thoughts. It's a give and take in there. And so when we get into a give and take discussion with someone on thoughts about spirituality, they're going to say some things that are just so far removed from what is true in the Bible, and that's okay. We're just trying to dialogue. We're trying to exchange thoughts and ideas in there. There's another kind that I call confrontational. And confrontational, don't think of it in terms of I'm attacking you. It's where we are each going after the ideology in there and trying to poke some holes in the philosophical approach, etc. Tim Keller did this extremely well over the years, in which he would point out the flaw in the particular worldview that someone may have in there, and challenge them to think about something a little better, think it through more deeply. This right here is proclamational. This is not really designed to be a dialogue. It's not designed for there to be, it's just coming in and it's just proclaiming. And what are they proclaiming? That the kingdom is here. What they are doing is they're trying to just draw a giant finger and say, hey, he's here. He's coming. He's here now. That more of the kingdom is coming. And yet he's already here. And so we get to experience him in this moment, and we're going to experience him in greater detail later on. There's just the proclaiming of truth. Don't be afraid from time to time to just proclaim the truth. Do it winsomely. Do it in a way that's not condescending, looking down at others, but we just want to proclaim this is what is true, and so we just want to say it. Great discussion, by the way, on the descriptive and prescriptive aspects. There are some things in the Bible that are clearly descriptive and rather than prescriptive, and there are other things that are clearly prescriptive and not just descriptive. A clear example of something that is descriptive in the scriptures in the book of Acts. It says that everyone was gathering together daily in the temple courts, and then it says they were all selling everything that they had, bringing the money and laying it at the apostles' feet and letting them distribute it as was needed. That was describing what was taking place at that time rather than prescribing what should happen in all places at all times. I would agree on this. I think that there is the principle in here that is prescriptive. The principle that we have is descriptive. Is prescriptive. And then there. And what's the principle? To trust God and offer the gospel freely. I think that's a prescriptive principle we should take from this section right here. Trust God to meet our needs and then offer the gospel freely to people. All right, I want to read this one because I found this to be really fascinating, and this is why I went back and got my phone for this really cool quote. It's in there. But look at verse 16. Behold, Jesus says, I am sending you out as sheep in the midst of wolves, so be wise as serpents and innocent as doves. Behold, maybe a better way to say that is pay attention. Listen up. Open your ears. I am the one right now, Jesus would be saying, who is actually sending you. I am pushing you. I am moving you away from the safety of what it is that we have to offer right here. And I'm going to be pushing you out. I'm going to push you out into a place that is actually going to have a lot of danger associated with it. So not merely a place in which we're going to be slightly uncomfortable, a place that we are actually going to move into, which the normal, rational human being would have a certain level of anxiety and fear. It would be expected to have that level of anxiety and fear. Jesus says, I'm going to be pushing you. Now, we see this so many times in the scriptures. The time that comes immediately on a large scale is when the Israelites are making their way out of Egypt. They've gotten away from the danger that was there in the land of slavery. And so they're making their journey, and they're going to go right up to the promised land. And a journey that should have taken just a matter of days is going to end up taking 40 years in the process. It's going to take 40 years because they were disobedient, they didn't trust God, et cetera, et cetera. But this is fascinating. When they are going out, it is God who changes the course on their behalf. So the course that they would have taken, God says, Moses, take them this direction. So Moses takes them that direction. And he puts them in a direction to where now they can't go to the east and they can't go to the west. And what's in front of them, or the north, if you will, I'm not looking literally on a map, but I'm thinking of movement. What's ahead of them is this vast body of ocean that they can't get through. And what is south of them, what's behind them, is this trained army, the greatest assassins on the earth at that time. So God has intentionally sent them into a place where they are now inadequate to defend themselves, inadequate to figure it out. God puts them in a place where the only thing they can do at that point, they got two options. Drown in their fear, or drown in the water, literally, putting themselves in there, killing themselves before they would get killed by them. Drown in their fear, anxiety, or the water. Or two, they can look up and trust God. I think that's what Jesus is doing. I'm sending you out intentionally, willfully. I'm not going to be all the times physically present with you when there. I want you to go out, and you are going to think that I am throwing you to the wolves. But look up and trust. I wonder how many times the Lord has asked us to do this with those that we love the most. I'm asking you to give up, let go, if you will. Stop trying to control and make things happen. And let your kid walk into something that is going to have all the appearances of being dangerous. Your spouse, your sibling, whomever it may be. I'm sending, God is going to put people into situations that they're going to have a choice. I can either drown in my fear, or I can look up and I can trust. And by the way, fear itself is not a bad thing. It's the giving in to fear that's the bad thing. It's letting the fear control us rather than us controlling the fear in the midst of circumstances. So, I'm going to send you out in the midst of wolves. So, since I'm sending you out there, be wise as serpents and innocent as doves. And that is an interesting combination that he puts together. No doubt in my mind that there's an allusion here to Genesis chapter 3 when it says, now the serpent was the wisest of all of the animals. And so he's asking them to be wise as a serpent, be shrewd as a serpent, but be innocent as a dove. I want to read you this. This comes from a man named Grant Osborne, who wrote a fantastic commentary on the book of Matthew. And I think this is great, the way that he describes it. So here's what he says. Their innocence must be evident to all, with the demeanor of a gentle dove in relationship to others. Without innocence, the keenness of the snake is crafty, a devious menace. Without keenness, the innocence of a dove is naive, helpless gullibility. So the Christian is to interact with outsiders with a practical wisdom and a behavioral innocence, so the kingdom truths go out with divine power without hindrance. Let me read that again. Without innocence, the keenness of the snake is crafty, a devious menace. Without keenness, the innocence of a dove is naive, helpless gullibility. So the Christian is to interact with outsiders with a practical wisdom and a behavioral innocence, so the kingdom truths go out with divine power and without hindrance. I love the way that he says that. And I think that's what Jesus is getting at. I don't think Jesus is saying he likes snakes. He created them, but does anybody like snakes? I think he's saying the wisdom and the shrewdness and the keenness by which they function, we as believers ought to be doing the same thing. How do we practically apply that? There is a good time and there is a not so good time to press in with the gospel with someone. A dear friend of mine has a brother this friend now, this gentleman now he's now actually into his 70s. Whoa, I just realized that. This was one of the guys that mentored me. And so his brother walked away from the church and walked away from the faith when they were in college. And so my friend said he would bring the gospel up on a regular basis with his brother, just spiritual conversation. His brother finally just told him, don't ever speak to me about, and then some colorful language went in there, about this again. And my friend said, so I told him, I will not bring it up again unless you bring it up. And then he began to pray, and he prayed from that day onward that the Lord would make his brother so miserable in his life without Christ that he would be begging for a way out of it. And so he just prayed in a variety of ways. God, make him miserable. Make the taste of the world so bitter in his mouth that he is looking for any other opportunity. So his brother began to study other religions along the way, trying to find out if there was something else that could satisfy him. And after a 25-year search, he came to the conclusion that there was just nothing else. And so he finally went back to my friend Randy. And he said, all right, tell me about this again. He had to wait for 25 years to talk to his brother again. He was wise as a serpent. Interact wisely, keenly with people. If you have an office and your office says that you should not share the religious, you should not have the term where you're stealing people. What's that term? Proselytizing. If your company or organization says, hey, no proselytizing in this business, then don't proselytize during office hours. Take them to lunch. Call them up. Go hang out afterwards. Meet before. Whatever. Don't violate the principles of the government. Of your local government of your organization. Pick and choose your times wisely and lovingly. Now, because I think it's an example in here somewhere, I think it's in there. The difference between what Paul and Peter, Silas, and those guys were doing, John, when the government said you can never ever speak about this ever again anywhere, and they said, hey, that we can't do. Obviously, we would ignore that. But be wise. Wise as a serpent, shrewd as a snake, innocent as a dove. That was a proverbial saying, more than likely, in Jesus' day and age, and really good. I did not draw. Did you draw the lines? Find out what that in Acts. I have no idea why. I have no lines. But know that it came true. All that Jesus had said. Question 13, which we had a good discussion on over here. You will be hated by all for my name's sake. And then it asked us to write down what we think it means by that. Here's my question to you. How many people do you know that actually hate Jesus? That is a rare person that I come across. Most people really like Jesus because they have an understanding of Jesus that is limited. They don't have a vision of Jesus taking him at his own words. And so what I find is that people really like Jesus. However, when you get honest with them about what he thought about himself, now they start getting irritated. Because Jesus says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. And now they start getting irritated. And then they start attacking the Bible. Well, Jesus probably didn't really say that, etc. People, as a general of thumb, don't hate someone who goes around healing others, showing grace and mercy unto others. What they absolutely hate, though, what they absolutely despise, is this notion of Jesus' lordship. So here's my question when I was going through this, reading this. Was Jesus talking about the world in general, or was he really honing in more specifically on the religious legalists? Who's going to really hate? If we have a message of grace and mercy, guess who the people were that flocked to Jesus for that? Those were the sinners, correct? They were the ones who were looking for something in their life to satisfy this longing that they had. They did not despise Jesus. They were running to Jesus. However, those that felt really good about their own posture, their good deeds were going to outweigh their bad deeds. Those that really felt they had a good handle on this religious thing, they despised Jesus because Jesus was preaching a message of grace and mercy. Jesus was preaching a message of saying, hey, I can do something for you that you can't. That's a really offensive message. So, are there reasons that followers of Christ are often hated today? I think we are oftentimes misunderstood. But I think that we at times can do the same thing that the nation of Israel did for years and years, and that's we can get to a place of condescension and looking down upon others. Can you believe that she? Can you believe that he? I think we can take some shots when we are condescending towards others. And then there is just the absolute convicting presence we have. I've told this story before. I think I've told it here. But I played golf in a golf tournament, and I was one of the last additions to this golf tournament. And it wasn't like an FCA or something like that. It was a golf tournament for some other charitable organization in Atlanta. And I'm in my late 20s at this point, and so I could still swing a golf club without my back going into 4 different pieces. And so we're on the second or third hole that's in there. And so then we finally start getting around to, well, what do you do? What do you do? What do you do? And so this guy that was on our team who could absolutely smash a golf ball had some of the most colorful language. And so he would describe his golf ball in ways, and I've never heard somebody describe it quite like that. I didn't know that there were that many descriptions for a round ball with dimples in it, but it was really interesting. And so everything became interesting, and his vocabulary, although it was wide and varied, tended to center in on just 4-letter words. And so we get to that second hole, and so we're asking, what do you do? And this guy's a teacher, and this guy's in business. And he gets over to me, and I said, well, I work with students. And he says, oh, great. What kind of work do you do with students? And I said, well, at the end of the day, you could call it counseling. And I said, oh, great, man. And so he finally pegs me down. I said, well, I'm actually a youth pastor. So I work with high school students on the campus and even off the campus. And primarily, I spend a lot of my time with kids that have gotten in over their heads with drugs and alcohol. He says, so you're a pastor? And I said, yeah. And he goes, no, really, what do you do? So, I'm a pastor to high school students. And he said, oh, well, that's cool. Conversation ended abruptly. He was riding in the other car. I'm riding over here in this car. And we go the next probably 2.5, maybe 3 holes, because we're going up onto the green where he has hit the ball off to the side of the green. And I mean, he hadn't had a good shot yet, but we're playing best ball. So, you just go to wherever the best ball is. That guy, it did not hit a single good shot after I told him I was a pastor. And finally, as we're going up on the green, He says, it's because that effing pastor's in my head. That's why I can't play golf. Now, fortunately, several months later, this guy comes to faith. He comes to Christ along in the process, which is why I was in that tournament. His buddy wanted me to come along so that I could develop a relationship with him and hopefully at some point share the gospel. And so he would tell, if he were here, and he's told this story as well, he would tell you it was just this convicting presence. He knew that his life was filled with so much nothingness, garbage, feeding on absolute filth. And the fact that there was someone there who was associated with the person of Jesus drove him nuts because he knew. So I think sometimes we're hated just because it's a convicting presence. Just because of who we are associated with, an assumption is made. Can I tell you this? Don't get offended when somebody hates you because you're associated with Jesus. It's okay. You just kill them with kindness. You just keep smiling. Keep praying for them. Keep loving them. Keep going on the love offensive. Keep serving them. And then you'll do as the scriptures talk about with heaping coals on them. And when the time comes in which they finally break, you likely will be somebody that they will come to. In 10:22, Jesus says that the one who endures to the end will be saved. It is suffering patiently. In the Webster's that I looked up, it was it just had last. And my first thought was not first, but last. And I went, oh, no. You just last. You just have the ability to last, to just make it through it. You just suffer patiently. And then what does it mean to endure to the end? Till either my death or the return of Christ. And my preference would be that Christ would return before I die. That's just my preference. Should we be surprised, question 15, that followers of Jesus would be falsely accused and mistreated as well? Of course not. And the reason we shouldn't be surprised is because Jesus was falsely accused. Remember what his reputation was? His reputation was being a glutton and a drunkard. He actually just liked food. And he drank real wine. And he hung out with people who ate too much food and drank too much wine. Although he didn't eat too much food and drink too much wine, he invited people into his life who did that. And so the religious people who were really, really uptight about that stuff, wanting to make sure that we separate ourselves from any sinners that's in there, they're the ones that said that's who he is. So no, don't be surprised at all when we will be falsely accused and mistreated. Question 17, is it 6:45 that we go to? Question 17, what does Jesus tell us is the correct response to the persecution outlined in the previous verses? Repeat this again. It's okay to be afraid. It's not okay to give in to fear. It's okay to be afraid that something is going to happen. We should not say, you know what, today is going to be a great day for me to be attacked. I'm looking forward to that. It's okay to be afraid. It's not okay to not do what God has called us to do because we are giving into our fear. So walk forward in fear, and you'll be living out what it is that God has called us to do all throughout the scriptures. There, we'll skip over the that section there about misplaced fear. And I want to get over here to question real quickly. Question 21 and then close with 25. In 10:32 and 33, Jesus calls for his followers to proclaim with boldness their association with him. And then he references over here to Romans 1:16. Paul said, I'm not ashamed of the gospel. It's the power of God for the salvation of all who will believe. And so the question that they ask in there, in addition to fear, what does he indicate can keep us from proclaiming the gospel as we should? Shame is the correct answer here of what they're asking for, but I will tell you, don't ever feel as though you need to apologize for God. Because God never asks for us to apologize for him. He does some things from time to time that I go, oh, why in the world would you let that happen, Lord? If I were God, I would not let some of these things happen because it just seems that others have even more ammunition against him. But God has never asked me to apologize for him. He has just simply asked me to present him, to introduce him to others. So don't let shame of the gospel, don't let shame of God, don't feel as though you have to have a pristine answer for even why God does what he does. Just share. Finally, question 25. First, Jesus teaches kingdom above family, and then it gets even closer to home. Kingdom above self. Man, I underlined that. That's the first time I've heard somebody put it like that. That was so good. Kingdom above family, and then kingdom above self. What do you think losing your life looks like according to the context of what Jesus was teaching there in verses 38 and 39? He who loses his life for my sake will keep it. He who tries to hang on to or keep his life, he's actually going to lose it in the process. Here's the simple illustration. It's not an emotional illustration. It's a very, very practical illustration. If we will approach life with the same kind of simplicity, notice I'm not saying it's easy. If we will approach life with the same kind of simplicity that we do in our travel, I think we are going to find that our journey, et cetera, is going to be a whole lot better. When I step onto a plane, there's not ever a moment where I walk into that cockpit and I say, hey, if you guys could just step aside for a little bit, there's some places I'd like to take this plane. I don't really trust you in here. I don't really trust this hunk of metal. When I get on a plane, I don't think at all about it. I pray every flight. I pray God keep us up in the air for all the time that we need to be kept up in the air, and then bring us down. We need to get brought down. And can you make that landing as soft as it can possibly be? I pray, everyone. But I never once try to assume the controls from the pilot. Do you know how often I try to assume controls from God? Because deep down inside, I'm not convinced that God cares as much as I do about those that I love. And I know how ridiculous that sounds. I understand, even as the words come out of my mouth, I go, oh, good grief. But yet, it's true. If we would approach our lives the same way, the same kind of simplicity as we do with travel, what I find it happens much better when I travel. If I'm traveling with someone that I know, we typically have great conversation. If there's some folks that I don't know, we typically have great conversation. I can get most anyone to talk. And all you got to do is get them talking about themselves. No. If we can enjoy the journey with those that are on the same plane that we are, going to whatever destination God has for us, and if we will trust his divine wisdom, trust his ability to get us to where we need to get to, and however he defines safely, I think we're going to enjoy the journey a whole lot more, rather than me trying to dictate to God what it is that he should make the journey look like. That's the challenge. The challenge is trying to hang on, me controlling this life versus, all right, you have total controls. And when we do this, according to Jesus, that's where we find the deepest level of satisfaction in life. So that's my prayer for us. Hey, thanks again for studying, for being so diligent in all of this. Let me pray. Heavenly Father, thanks again for all the ways that you have already blessed us. Thanks for this particular study again. Thanks that we are digging into what it is that Matthew brought to us all those years ago directly from you. And so, Lord, help us to put these things into practice. That which you really want us to dwell on, to marinate on, then, Lord, bring that back to our minds and let us meditate on it. Let us even memorize it. But ultimately, Lord, help us to become doers of your word rather than just hearers only. Whatever you want to save for us at a later point in life that we'll learn later on, then don't let us spend as much time on that. We just want to know your word and then obey your word, because we want to know you and obey you. We trust you. We love you. We pray all this in Jesus' name. Amen. Thank you. I should have at some point just... By the way, did nobody else's name tag print out?